Guys, it's Mathel here once again, and today I've got a bit of a letdown, I would say. And that is that I basically quit a build. So I did start a Chaos, Flame Blast, Firestorm, Flame Surge, whatever. Just a Chaos Fire Conversion build as per pretty much the flavor of the month at the moment. And I just couldn't really follow through with it. Took me to about mid-level 80s, pretty easily, pretty comfortably. There's just something about the build that didn't quite catch me. Now, most of you would be familiar with this type of build. It is using a Consuming Dark and Infernal Mantle, converting all of your fire damage to Chaos, and on top of that, using a Binos for Prolif. So that means that your Chaos damage can Prolif thanks to the effect on Binos. And I'll go over that in just a little bit. But there was something about the build that just didn't quite catch me. I'm not sure what it was, if it was just a bit too strong, a bit too easy, scaling was too good, because it's very cheap to get going and to get insane amounts of damage happening. Maybe I just didn't have enough crit, didn't really like the playstyle, maybe there was no shattering from the crits, as per, cold damage and all that. Defenses maybe just weren't quite right. I'm not sure what it is really, but I did manage to get the build to about level mid-80s and face rolled quite a bit of content here and there. But I just, there's not much I really wanted to do more with it. Like, it could do. These builds are really strong for just steamrolling the content at the moment and even doing Uber Utsiri. But I ran out of steam as far as wanting to play it any further. And I couldn't really even decide which skill I wanted to use. Because out of Flame Blast, Firestorm, and Flame Surge, like all of them were really quite good, and I'm not sure what I wanted to do with them. Another point though was Binos Prolif. It's very weird. When it works well, it works really well, as you can see with the boxes here. Like every single mob has to be pretty much touching the mob next to it for the Binos Prolif to really go off. As you can see here, we have a bit of a fail. But, yeah, if it works well, like with the boxes, it works super well. But when it works badly, it just does nothing. Like if a mob is standing a good foot away from another mob, well, they're not going to chain Prolif or anything, and you're going to have to do a lot of different attacks. So that's solved largely with a Firestorm, for example. Firestorm doesn't really rely too much on the Prolif, and it's more just about having a decent enough area, having decent enough crit chance, because I'm a crit base, and the Firestorm will just get everything in its area. Binos Prolif does help, but it's not strictly necessary. Now the build though hits immensely hard. I ended up scaling this crit Flame Blast to levels of DPS where you don't even poison after critting so hard. As you can see, I think that first move out just didn't get poisoned at all. You can crit so hard that it overcaps on the poison, like right there. I overcapped that crit, so it didn't do any poison damage whatsoever when it should have. Likewise, the Binos regen hits absurd amounts. Such absurd amounts that it goes into the negatives because it overcaps. So, when I was critting with the Flame Blast, my Flame Blast tooltip by the way was about 27k with the Conk effect. When I was critting with the Flame Blast, and you'd stand in the regen that the Binos caused, I would get well over 1 million regen, and 1 million seems to be the cap that it shows on the defensive tab, tip, whatever. So it hits 1 million, and then it goes into negatives. So I was hitting like negative 300,000 regen, something stupid like that. Meaning, if you have your regen up and you stand in it, you pretty much can't die to anything besides a one-shot. So my damage was hugely overkill, and this is in a 5 link. But it just, yeah, I don't know. I'll leave it up to you guys if you want to play this or not, but I couldn't really get around it, so it's not a particular build I'm completing or making a guide for or anything like that. It's a really, really good at Atziri build as compared to, let's say, the Cock Slam build I was just showcasing recently before this. Cast on Crit Ground Slam is so much fun and it's so good at mapping and it's so fast, but it's a god-awful at Atziri build. Whereas this is kind of a much more all-rounder build, and that's mostly because of Chaos Damage. Chaos Damage lets you negate pretty much every map mod and just steamroll a lot of things like Atziri, which, especially in the Uber phases, has lots of resists. So Chaos, while there is Chaos resist as well, it's nowhere near as significant as Elemental resist. So when you get to these higher sort of Atziri maps and levels, Chaos just shines. And the Flame Blast and the Firestorm playstyle for Atziri just lets you be very defensive while putting out immense amounts of damage. So all I have to do for the bosses with Flame Blast is pick my time. If I don't have time to do a big attack, I just do a little dab, and that crit will do huge amounts of damage, probably even kill something. Or if I have lots of time, I'll wind up a 10 stack, which will more or less one-shot anything, bosses inclusive, as you'll see later in the video. It's a great Atziri build, and a great Uber build. And then you can choose Firestorm as well. Firestorm is much more defensive, in that all you do is throw out a Firestorm and run around in circles for a while. And Firestorm hits immensely hard right now as well, with this Chaos combo. So this shouldn't be anything new to a lot of you, since this poison meta has been running rampant for almost 3 whole months. It just took me a while to get around to trying it, because well, I'm not a big fan of the flavor of the month. Especially when it's this goddamn stupidly overpowered. As you can see right here. This is still just a normal Atziri run, bear in mind, but I don't think Uber would face too much more of a challenge when you have damage that ridiculous. So another interesting point though was Flame Surge is fairly usable with the build. Flame Surge does quite a lot of damage and it casts pretty goddamn fast too. That's one thing you can try out. I don't think I have any Flame Surge footage here though. Just because I didn't use it too much or too often. I was mostly into trying to recreate my Flame Dab, which was based off of Prolif and Crit Flame Blast. Sad thing is, Prolif is pretty much dead, just because the AoE is terrible. The damage nerf that it got was like 30% or something. It's just terrible, and why? I don't know. I haven't seen a fire-based build that uses fire all league. It's pretty much strictly fire conversion into chaos. It's just so much stronger at the moment. I do wish Prolif would make a bit of a comeback because the range just sucks. That's the problem with it. Last time I tried it, the AoE just was not good. Now there are a few other choices for this build as far as auras go. I'm going with Assassin's Mark just because gives you a lot of damage, gives me my power charges, and also gives me more consistent crit. But you could use something like Temp Chains, could use Vulnerability, you can use whatever you want. And here's a Firestorm kill for Atziri. Now, as I'm saying, it's pretty face roll. I'm on a 5-link here with a Firestorm. I'll show you the setup afterwards, probably. And all you do is just throw out a couple of Firestorms, you can run around in circles. Find, pick your time when you want to throw out a Firestorm, and you'll probably finish off the Atziri ad or whatever really easily. But I was personally enjoying Flame Blast a little bit more for the Atziris here. Just because it hits so goddamn hard, and it also gave me my first quad split kill right there. Meaning I one-shot all 4 of the split phase ads, which is something I've never done before in any build. Mostly because I've never tried, and also because it just hasn't ever had the capabilities or the damage for it. But after I realized I could one-shot the split phase ads, I soon after definitely had to try doing all four at once, and hey, it worked. We do have two-player HP, I think, at some point here as well, and that's not too much of an issue for this build either. Just showcases what it'd be a bit more like if you were doing Uber Siri. So I'll show off the gear that I used, or the setup, just in case you want to do something similar yourself. So the character at the moment is broken apart, but don't worry too much about what gear is thrown around where, or what the passive tree looks like. I'll have a link up to the passive tree in the text. The main thing I want to highlight is just how exactly the build works and what the core items are that you need for this type of thing. So first of all, it's a consuming dark. That's what you need for the build, and that's pretty much the most important item for these fire to chaos type builds. 75% of your fire damage converted to chaos damage, meaning, as you can see here, Flame Blast does 75% of its damage as chaos, 25% as fire, which then in conjunction with your Infernal Mantle means your Flame Blast does 100% chaos damage. Now, secondly, Consuming Dark does your chaos damage, poisons enemies. So now all of this 100% chaos damage always poisons every enemy you hit. And as we all know, poison is pretty goddamn good now. So the basis behind this build is going completely to chaos damage and then scaling your chaos damage high so you can get your poison damage scaled as well. As the crit version of this build, I'm mostly doing that through crit, but on top of that you also get chaos damage, because chaos damage and dot damage, but mostly chaos damage is what I'm focusing on here, gives you extra flame blast damage, so it'll make it hit harder initially, but chaos damage also scales the dot portion of your poison. So whenever you hit something, you poison enemies, that gives them a dot, and chaos damage will increase that dot as well. So chaos damage on your tree is very important for this type of build. Same with things like fatal toxins. If you're a non-crit build, that's very important, as well as damage over time. Chaos damage there, chaos damage there, there's more damage over time here, etc. But since I'm a crit version of the build, just getting more crit and crit multi really makes a large difference for the build. The harder we crit, the more more that dot will do as well. So the character's pretty much broken apart at this point. Doesn't really tell you much, but you know, bunch of crit multi. In the end, I think I had about a 14,000 chaos damage flame blast in that tooltip. And that's without crit. So we're critting for some, you know, crazy hundreds of thousands of damage of chaos when flame blast is fully charged up. So Consuming Dark, highly important, and Infernal Mantle also important to get that 100% conversion. Now, Infernal Mantle also gives you a bunch of crit, some good fire damage, +1 to fire gems, and has the drawback of 100% increased spell damage taken on low mana, which means you always have to be above 35% mana, or you can spec into Blood Magic. As you can see, spec into Blood Magic, and have 0 mana. If you spec into Blood Magic, have 0 mana, that negates the entire negative effect of that increased spell damage taken on low mana. That's not how I was playing for the most part. Ignore the fact that I'm right now Blood Magic. I was mostly just sitting well above like 50% mana and making sure I barely ever went down below that. Now, secondly, the other most important item, especially for the Flame Blast version of this build, is the binos. That is because it says, on killing a poisoned enemy, nearby enemies are poisoned. So that's the prolif I'm talking about. Whenever you kill something, if something's standing next to it, it's also going to get poisoned after that first guy dies from the degen. And that's basically how the prolif chains, but things had to be really close next to each other for that to work, and it felt a little clunky at times. And then as well as that, on killing a poisoned enemy, nearby allies regenerate life. So when you kill something, there's like a bit of a ground that it will be you can stand on that gives you life regen, and your life regen over here, 31, goes up to like 400 billion, right? It's insane. You essentially can't die if you're standing in that ground. Now the rest of the gear is entirely up to you. I was using a couple of Elrion rings just to make the Flame Blast pretty much free and not have to worry about mana at all. If you're going Blood Magic, you don't really have to do that because it's not a big deal to cast off of your life. Then you can run like Malagaras, maybe some Voidbringers. They're pretty hard to negate the mana cost of. You know, crit multi stuff, whatever. My actual gem setup for Flame Blast itself was Flame Blast, added Chaos, Controlled Destruction. Now, yes, it reduces crit, but it was still extremely useful. I was also using Conk Effect. I don't have it on me because that's a huge multiplier. While it does reduce the radius of the Flame Blast, it's highly worth it in my opinion. And also Void Manipulation, which was added Chaos damage. I'm not going to go into it too much more than that because I never really completed the build. I just gave you the basics, so that if you want to try this build out yourself, feel free to go ahead. And I think there's plenty of guides out there you can follow. I got to level 84, I was a shadow. The build was thoroughly overpowered, but just didn't really resonate with me, so I kinda had to stop. In any case, thanks for watching the video guys. I'm Mathel. I'll see you guys next time.